Hi, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. Here we answer your questions on media and production 7 days a week. Of course, you can get those questions into us via Makana, where you can not only vote on the questions and chat about the questions in addition to asking about the questions, which is great. If you don't know how to get into Makana, just head on over to officehours.global/join. Register there. You'll get an email every day with what we're talking about and all the links on how to get on the inside track. Now, that's not the only way to ask questions. We've got askofficehours.global. That's askofficehours.global, and it's open 24/7. So if you've got a question, you're watching this later, and you have it pop into your head, you want to get it into us, just askofficehours.global, name, question, and boom, we'll get it in over the next few shows. That's how it works. So let's get into the first question. Alexander, what do we have?
First one this morning comes from Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. What are the most critical safety considerations when working with non-traditional rigs, particularly in challenging environments or with moving vehicles?
Courtney.
Well, planning. Safety is always on a movie set where you're using vehicles or stunts or even a moving camera. There's always a safety meeting at the beginning of the day that talks about if you see anything unsafe, notify somebody. And also there will be a safety meeting before doing stunts where the stunt coordinator will, sit down with the little toy cars and show you exactly where all the cars are going to be and what the plan is for doing this stunt, what's supposed to happen. And they will show you the safe areas where you could be. And a lot of times they keep those pretty far away because they don't know where things are going to go. If you're using a dolly, on the set, always don't set anything within about 1.5 feet or 2 feet of the dolly track or the dolly because it'll probably get knocked over or somebody will run into it or trip over it. So also when you're working with motion control, it's very important to stay away from the reach of the motion control arm and or dolly because those things can fly down the track at very high speed. And they're not looking out for you. They don't have collision detection on most of them. And the arm can swing very fast and to reposition. And if you don't know it's coming, it can knock you for a loop. So what we do all the time is set up stanchions with like caution tape around the MoCo rig to make sure you don't get within, clunking distance of the arm when it's moving throughout the shot. And they've been known to run away, which means that the servos get in a position where they don't realize where they are and they break loose from their computer control and just go flying down to the other end of the track, or the arm will swing around at really high speed. So you want to make sure you're not within the neighborhood of that. There's a lot of other safety considerations. When you're working on high lifts, you always want to wear a harness and clip into a safety harness onto the bucket or the platform if you're using a scissor lift when you're using that, so you're not going to fall out of that if you're leaning over or something. So there's, in fact, in the union, we have to take a bunch of safety courses depending upon what our function is on the set, and have to be safety certified with a little card before we even go on the set so that the producers don't have to pay huge insurance rates using untrained personnel on the set.
Jesse?
From our perspective, the most important safety concern is hiring people who do this regularly and letting them do their job. This is not the kind of thing you want to noodle around with and experiment with unsupervised or without a lot of training.
And when you're talking non-traditional rigs, if this is a phone rig that you're building or something that you're kind of putting together yourself on more of a DIY basis as opposed to something that's purpose-built, you've got to always be looking at what are the risks that you're taking. If you're somehow rigging up a phone or a camera to a moving vehicle and it's a system that wasn't specifically designed and engineered to withstand all that goes with being on a moving vehicle, you're at risk of losing that camera or losing, if it's a phone, if it's a camera, whatever it is. The other thing that you need to think about is under no circumstances should you ever be putting people in harm's way. If you don't know exactly what you're doing, then you have to be very, very, very conscious of what kinds of risks you're taking because you don't want people to get hurt. Courtney?
One thing I forgot, and I just got a letter from Contract Services Administration that I have to take the course. Now all members of the crew of all the unions have to take a gun safety course after last year's tragic shooting on the set. rust, so that all personnel on the set have to know about gun safety when guns are being used on the set. So that's very important. And if the rules were followed, people may still be alive today.
Yeah, always. It's easy for us to talk about protecting gear, but the most important thing has to be making sure that that we're not ever putting people in harm's way. Next question.
Mike Edwards in Brooklyn, New York. Morning, everyone. Is there a tool, not named Descript, that allows me to batch transcribe YouTube videos accurately? Thanks.
Jesse?
If we scratch the word accurately, there are plenty of tools. We use DaVinci Resolve to do our transcriptions. You could be using YouTube. YouTube automatically transcribes everything you do and punches out your time code with timestamp, and you can download that as, I think, SRT and make the revisions that you need. Also, I don't know, did I mention CapCut yet? CapCut is another one that we use. That should be enough to get you started.
And Mike, if you want to hack around something your own way, there are also ways to download the Whisper AI transcription engine. And I know that some folks have used Mac Whisper, but there are also ways to get at that with a command line interface if you want to create something that's batchable and scriptable. Next question.
From the QR code, Anawahi Black Bear Marshall in Oahe is asking, heard someone here say you can use NDI for KVM control on some computer devices. Is that true? How do you do that?
You definitely can use NDI for KVM control, and I think we've heard Jeff Keithley talking about it a few times, whether it was on office hours or extra hours. However, I've never done it, so I can't really speak to exactly how to get that in. But if you happen to see Jeff on the panel, that would be a good day to bring that question back in because he's something of an expert on all that stuff. Next question.
Zach Stallsmith in Chautauqua, New York asks, I'm selling my iMac and will, of course, factory reset it beforehand. Any tips or tricks to make sure everything is indeed wiped and ready to go?
Jesse?
So what you're going to want to do is build like a USB or an external hard drive that is exclusively designed to be your installer, and you can download the install package from the Mac store, and then when you can search the terminal command to do this. I don't want to get into all the details of it, but just search how to build a bootable drive to install Mac OS. And when you do that, you're going to want to format the drive, but not just a quick format. You're going to want to do a multi-write and erase on the drive, because what happens when it installs on a clean hard drive is it kind of like packages everything in one sector of the hard drive because that's the most efficient, instead of scattering everything out across the hard drive. And what that means is that you're only going to be writing data on the tiniest sliver of your hard drive possible, and every other sector on your hard drive is not going to be actually wiped. The data is still going to be there, but the allocation files won't point to that data. So somebody could take that hard drive very easily and rebuild all of your files. And if you keep your tax information, your credit card information, things like that on your hard drive unencrypted, a simple format won't do that. You need to do a multi-pass where you write data, erase data, write data, erase data over and over and over. It'll take a long time, but it's worth it to protect your hard drive when you sell it.
And there's also there is a support document on the Apple website. There's nothing hacky or not officially supported about what Jesse's talking about, and it's just create a bootable installer for Mac OS is all you need to do. In order, put that into Google and look at the Apple support document, and then it will, depending on what version of Mac OS that you're trying to install, it'll tell you how to do that. What Jesse's talking about from a formatting point of view, right on the bootable installer, it'll basically allow you to boot that Mac into. You could also boot the Mac into recovery mode before you use the bootable installer in order to erase and format the drive. And the nice thing about recovery mode is that in addition to allowing you to reinstall the OS, you can also open up the terminal and open up a version of disk utility that is separate from the system volume that has your sensitive data on it that you're trying to reformat. So if we're here into disk utility and you were to select a volume, I can't do that one because it's got all my computer on it, but you would click erase up here. And when you click erase, what that'll allow you to do is, as Jesse's talked about, you can choose just a quick erase, a quick format, which is what you don't want to do. And essentially that's like, if you think of your computer's directory file or index file as being something of a phone book, when you do a quick format, all you're doing is really throwing the phone book away. Everybody still lives there. All the houses are still there. They could get paved over because nobody knows that they exist anymore. But by going ahead and doing a read-write erase, and you can do 1 pass, 2 passes, 3 passes, 7 passes, it'll actually go to every single sector on that hard drive and write over it with zeros. And the more times that you do that, the safer it is. It's a little less easy to recover a ghost of an image now that we're using SSDs instead of magnetic hard drives. But that's the general guidance there. Next question.
Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas asks, what does the sound mixer crew do on a TV show like Survivor or The Amazing Race?
Courtney?
Well, reality television is a little bit different than any other type of television production. The sound crews on things like Amazing Race or Survivors usually have multiple sound crews. You'll have either, depending upon whether it's union or not, you'll have a sound mixer that has a bag system. He's got a bag over his neck with a recorder in it and multiple channels of wireless receiver and a wireless transmitter as well to do what's called a camera hop that goes from his bag of audio to one of the cameras if multiple cameras are shooting that particular group of people. On Amazing Race and Survivors, they split up. It's a real time, so they split up into different groups. So they have different camera crews go with different groups. And so you have a sound mixer and cameraman with each group. And so that sound mixer with each group is serving that camera. And in some cases, like Biggest Loser, those where they have where everybody's within range of each other, they will have a central receiver point that receives all the camera hop frequencies so that the producers can sit there in front of a row of monitors and see outputs from all the cameras. And listen to what's going on, make notes for editorial on what they want to cover, et cetera. And they will also have a multi-track recorder like Pro Tools or something in a rack that's receiving all of these camera hop frequencies and tracking all of them onto a common time code. And everything is tied together with common time code so that the cameras and each group have time codes so that they can synchronize them if the groups come together, et cetera. So they overlap. It's quite crazy, and there's a lot of different solutions for doing that, but that's the basic way that reality television is done. Multi-track recording on multiple multi-tracks and one big multi-track that has the output of the mix from multiple mixers.
Alexander?
Courtney, can you speak to what are the modern technology products that people are using now on set to record? Are they using sound devices? Are they using some other high-end products? What are they using to actually capture this stuff?
Yeah, they're using sound devices, usually 8-track recorder in a bag. To most individual mixers are using that. And the rack mount will be using a Pro Tools or Boom recorder, something that can handle, 20 to 30 tracks onto a hard drive at once. So they'll use software on a computer to coalesce all those tracks into a single multi-track file or multiple mono-track files. They're all synchronized with time code. And there's some new technology. I don't know if they're using it yet because it's been a while since I've been on the set of a show like that. Is these new AWS is that it? Wireless systems. Sennheiser has one, I think, in Sound Devices. I think their new wireless works this way as well. It's a single rack unit that just sucks in an entire wide band range of multiple channels, up to 64 channels in a single 1 RU rack receiver. And then it sorts them out digitally so that you can have 64 channels coming into this one receiver. And they just suck down a whole bunch of bandwidth and sort it out digitally later. So those are pretty amazing, but I think they're pretty expensive too. I haven't used one.
And bringing in the chat a little bit, Mickey chimed in and said that they do a centralized recording for the Tribal Council and Survivor, and the common brands that are seen on set. He sees a lot of sound devices as well as the electrosonics. Next question.
Robert Zababari in Poland is asking, what is the best way to switch two sources at the same time? Example, on an ATEM switcher and in Vmix.
Jesse, what do you know?
I don't know enough about this pipeline that Robert is working on to answer with too much detail, but when we're doing dual mixes for dual broadcasts that are running in parallel to each other, we split the editing team as early as we can in the chain, because when you're looking at two feeds that are being edited in two separate ways for two different audiences, that's two full teams that you're working with. So if you've got two full editing suites, you've got two technical directors, you've got two people operating the switchboard. You might go all the way back to the cameras and be shooting 3 cameras for one broadcast and 3 cameras for another, where that would come up as something like if you're doing a horizontal broadcast for YouTube and a vertical broadcast for Instagram. We haven't gotten to that point where we have 6 camera ops doing 3 cameras for each show, but you go as far back in your chain as you can afford to go and build it as 2 separate chains, or we do.
Courtney?
I haven't done this, but I'll ask some of our members here who use BitFocus Companion with their Stream Decks. Would it be possible to program a Stream Deck to switch to control 2 different ATEMs at the same time, so that the one button on your Stream Deck would switch both ATEMs? Is that possible?
Yeah, Scott Mueller in the chat mentioned that he uses Companion and a few Stream Decks to switch both ATEM and Vmix. They both have hooks into BitFocus Companion, so that could be a way to tie those cuts together. Next question.
Vic Hernandez in Springfield, Missouri is asking, admittedly subjective, besides cool hues, what would you recommend for a socially neutral business-oriented background? Maybe bookcases, plants, landscape, pictures, etc.
Nigel?
I think it really depends on what message you're trying to send, or whether you're trying to send no message at all. I read an article years ago about when we used to wear ties and jackets and stuff, about you can wear a fancy tie or a plain tie. And if you're meeting someone for just, 3 seconds, don't wear a fancy tie, it's distracting. And if you're meeting someone for an hour, wear a fancy tie because it says you're an interesting person. And I think the same is true to some extent of the backgrounds we pick. That if you're doing a business thing where you really want them to focus on you and your words, you probably want to simplify your background as much as you can, even to the point where you're getting one of those Manfrotto backgrounds, the gray or one of those that really simplifies what it's doing. If, however, like us, you tend to talk for longer and you're on more frequently and you want to send a message about, I have this technology, I have this, whatever it is, then you might litter your background with more stuff. But really think through how long you're going to be talking to that people, and what message you're trying to send by your background.
Jesse?
What you want, what I think you want, is austerity and depth. So if you look in the background of anyone on this panel right now, there is depth in the background. We've tried to separate ourselves from everything behind us, and there's some articles behind us, but we try not to keep it too cluttered because a little bit of austerity goes a long way. What I think is most important, more than the dressing behind them, once you've achieved austerity and depth, what's more important is separating the lighting. So you want to be able to control the lighting on the subject separate from the lighting on the background. And what I mean by that is that you can bring down the background to a nice, mellow, calm level that's not distracting, but you can keep the subject well lit and clear in the foreground and separated from that background.
Courtney?
Yeah, I'd say in a corporate setting, you want to make it look like a corporate office, even if you're shooting on a small soundstage or something. You want to put a bookcase is good with some fake books that you don't want to be able to read the titles on. So either make them generic books, which you can rent by the foot. There's prop books that you can buy. They're just the backs, and you stick them on a shelf, and they look like law books, things like that, with unreadable titles. Also, a plant is good. There it is. It'd be nice if I had a little light I could hang from the ceiling and put a little touch of a light on that plant. But make sure it's a healthy plant or a fake plant, like that one is, because you don't want to have a dead plant in the background. That's really bad karma. Sometimes CJ's background right now is very carefully arranged, and that's really a studio, not his living room back there. He's carefully arranged it. So pictures are okay, but you don't want to have any recognizable people in the pictures. A lot of people will put certificates or diplomas, or if they're lawyers, they will have all their legal awards back there in the background, so it looks makes you look a little bit more professional. And like I say, a plant couldn't hurt.
Alexander?
Yes, and speaking of plants, I have one right back there. You can see right there, and I highly recommend IKEA fake plants because they require zero maintenance.
And Nigel, you want to come back in?
Yep, I must have pressed the button by mistake, so happy to say what I've said. Oh, but thank you for asking earlier about what this was in my background, because that's my letter from the Queen. So I wanted people to know I had a letter from the Queen, so I left it there.
So if you
Did you install
bit of
her
mystery,
stereo? Is that how you got that letter from the Queen? Did you set up an AV room in Buckingham Palace?
No, it was a long time ago. And it's actually really not from the Queen. It was from her private secretary, but it's close enough. It's got the stamp of the Buckingham Palace on it.
Yeah, there's sometimes if you are going to talk at length and there is a little Easter egg or something in the background that someone can ask about, that can be a way to draw someone in. Because I was looking at Nigel's background, and it made me lean in a little bit and say, wait a minute, what's that? Like I have an old iMac back there where I took the LCD panel out of it, and now you can see the guts. But there's a funny story in there. There's a disassembled iPhone for iPhone 1.0 2G or whatever you want to call it that's sitting back there. What I've really liked since I moved into this space is putting the rest of the office at an angle. So it creates a little bit of extra depth in the room because the diagonal is going to be shorter, but also it creates a parallax. So you'll see the two different walls coming together, and that's part of the intention with the picture frames and the lines on the bricks is to try and give you that sense of we're going somewhere. The one thing that I wish I'd done differently was to get a cooler tone of brick. Because if I didn't have the lighting as dim as I did, then my skin tones are competing in that same space as where the bricks are. And so that is the one caution, is that you have to really be conscious about color. But to Jesse's earlier point, when you make the background intentionally a little bit darker than the foreground, it helps create that separation between you and whatever's behind you. And there was the Harvard study about books behind you and plants behind you. Makes you sound like you're more authoritative. But if everything is in the same color space, it gets pretty noisy and kind of distracting. But creating a little bit of separation can make anything look nice. And really, it's all about how it feels. How you look and feel when you're coming across in an interview or in a meeting where you're teleconferencing or telecommuting, whatever, insert word here about what you want to call it these days. How you look and sound is how you're going to be perceived. So if the meeting was important and you would have shined your shoes and ironed your pants before you went to that meeting, that would have taken you 20 minutes, half an hour to get all the things ready, to make sure your shirt was pressed, make sure everything looked quite right. That's the same exact concept that we're talking about now, except it might take you 8 to 20 hours to set up the room exactly how you want it, but after that, you don't have to do a whole lot of work. Next question.
Scott Mueller in Germantown, New York. Adobe Podcasts enhanced speech feature on a clip of someone using an onboard laptop mic results were great. Having to process tracks on the website is not as great. Anyone have similar results from any AU plugins?
Jesse?
Let's take a look at what we're talking about, and then we'll talk about what we're looking at. So what we're talking about is Adobe Podcast, and this is an all in-browser podcasting experience that does have some speech correction tools. And I'm not exactly sure what the problem is of having the enhanced speech tethered to the to the website. if everything about this software package is tethered to the website. I don't have AU plugins that I can recommend, but we use the DaVinci Resolve audio enhance features all of the time, and not a single client has gotten suspicious that we are overprocessing their audio. So give it a go.
Alexander?
Yeah, I haven't actually tried this tool, but I'd like to process stuff manually. Now, there's certain tools that I'll use, obviously various EQs and that kind of thing. I also use a plugin by Waves called Clarity Vox, and that one is great as a way of just basically separating the human speech from actual noise that's in the background. It does a remarkable job. Even if somebody's standing on the side of the street and there's traffic and cars driving by, it does a really good job. And it's quite natural, especially and you can push it fairly aggressively, and it does quite a good job. So that's the tool that I use. I always manually edit the audio and apply EQ and then broadband noise reduction, and that seems to work pretty well. I'm sure these tools are probably getting to the point now where they're going to sound better than a human being trying to massage the audio manually. But it's something I've got to play around with. I just haven't got to that point yet.
And you can also, if you're on an Apple Silicon computer, as you're running this, Scott, you can use the sound isolation. So the same sound isolation that runs on your iPhone for voice isolation mode, you can also run that just as an AU plugin. So I just brought up Audio Hijack here, and I just drug in AU sound isolation. I can choose my wet dry. I can say voice or high quality voice. And I could also, if I wanted to, for an AU plugin, throw in a dynamics processor or a parametric EQ. But again, as with all processing, a lighter touch will be appreciated. If you all of a sudden start to sound like a Cylon, then that's going to make your podcast a little bit harder to listen to. Next question.
This one's for me. Has anyone on the panel got KVM switching over IP working with a Streamdeck and Companion? I have a USB 8-port KVM I use to switch computers between one keyboard and mouse. It has a serial port and an RJ45 port for connectivity. And I got one of these cables here, but haven't figured out how to use it.
Courtney?
Yeah, I guess it kind of depends on whether there is a BitFocus Companion plugin for that particular KVM. Is this the one that you have? Because it sounds like it has the same features.
That is the exact one that I have, the 8-port from TestSmart.
Right. And it does have the ability to control it over RS-232 and or over Ethernet. But you just have to look up in the user's manual what the what the command controls are on Ethernet, what port, and if it has a specific address that it uses for communicating over the Ethernet. And then you would have to be able to write something or program something into BitFocus Companion that would handle it. That's what the plugin drivers are for. So if there is a driver, if they have worked with BitFocus or with Streamdeck, to control, to issue those commands over the network, then you should probably be able to do it. But why do you necessarily need to do that? So you have somebody remotely controlling it? Or since a KVM is used locally almost always.
Well, it's because it's in a rack.
Yeah.
It's in a rack, and I'm using the remote, and I want this is a little clunky, and I want a much quicker way to be able to, I'm planning on buying another Stream Deck, and I want to have another Stream Deck that just has the buttons for the KVM, because if I'm using this on the show like this, if I have to switch to a computer that has my web browser that goes into my ATEM, I have to pick up the remote, point it at the thing, which uses IR. It's just too slow to switch.
Doesn't it have keyboard shortcuts that on your controlling keyboard you can just hit a control key and a number, or sometimes you'll hit scroll lock a couple of times will switch to the next input.
Yeah, I think they have an app, but it's Windows only. That's the problem. So I've got Windows PCs. I could probably hook it up. I just haven't got there yet. So
I don't think it's Windows only. It's looking for keyboard keystrokes from the keyboard that is your main controlling keyboard that's plugged into it. So it doesn't necessarily. It can be operating system agnostic, because it's just looking for those key codes coming from your keyboard. And sometimes, if you look in the manual, sometimes it'll say, if you hold down Control Shift and then hit a number between 1 and 8, it will switch to that output. but the software that you're using on those computers has to be able to ignore those keystrokes, custom keystrokes.
And I know you've seen this in the chat, Alexander, but David Brady recommends for anyone else listening to look at, I think it's Vicrio Pro as the middle glue, and that can help you make it happen. Next question.
Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. How do you use your phone and watch, Apple and Android, as TV remote?
Nigel?
So for many decades, people have sold many devices designed to automate the home automation of the television with the DVR or the DVD or the cable box or whatever it is. And invariably, it never works very well. For years, people sold what was called universal remote controls. And it was a huge business, but most of us who had universal remote controls just ended up getting annoyed with them, throwing them away for reasons we can discuss. I think if you're stuck in the Apple ecosystem, and I think Courtney probably can talk to the Android one better than I can, if you're stuck in the Apple ecosystem, then on your iOS device, your iPhone or your iPad, you swipe from the top right down, get Control Center, and you'll see a little picture of that lovely little remote control that comes with your Apple TV, and you can really use that. But I have to tell you, it's much quicker just to take the remote control of the Apple TV and use that instead. I don't know if you can do it from your watch, but we spent many decades trying to do this integration. And the reality is it's sort of much easier to do just with the Apple TV remote controller. If you're an Apple TV user, you can turn your television on and off. You can increase the sound, and then you can change. In the days of universal remote controls or more sophisticated home automation packages, you had people saying, but I want on my remote to press this for CNN and this for CNBC and this for Fox and this for ABC. And that was really easy to do, by the way, with cable boxes. It's become increasingly hard to do with IP devices. And so in the end, I just pick up the remote control for my Apple TV.
Courtney?
Well, my current watch, which looks Apple Watch-ish which isn't, it's an Android watch. It has Alexa built in. And since I have Alexa Fire TVs plugged in as the mainstream 4K Fire Sticks plugged into all my TVs, and I have them all named separately, I can just, bring up the A Lady on my watch, swipe to the right, and then hit the button and talk to it and tell it to, say, play such and such, play the next episode of Star Trek on my living room TV. And it'll turn on the TV, it'll load up, it'll go to the channel that has Star Trek on it, find it, and start playing it. So it's quite handy. Plus, I can control all the lights in the house and the air conditioner and everything else from my watch because it's has the A Lady Alexa built in. That watch cost you all of... it's on sale today for $34.99, and it interfaces to both you people with the iPhones and Androids, so you can do that as a cheap remote control. Plus, it has all the features of that expensive $300 Apple Watch, including blood oxygen level monitoring. So,
I do miss when there was a time in between the Harmony remote and then Logitech Harmony that had all the touch screen and everything. And then they had that little IR blaster that allowed you, if you had a receiver and a cable box and a television, that it could just go 1, 2, 3 right in sequence and turn everything on and turn everything off. But to Nigel's earlier point, very difficult, not difficult, but just tedious to program what you wanted to program. Ever since I started to use the Apple TV as the everything, including the cable package with YouTube TV, it's made things a lot simpler because if you have that CEC, the HDMI control, when you turn your Apple TV on and off, the television turns on and off, and the soundbar turns on and off, and everything just connects, and you feel like you're not needing to fumble around with 4 different remotes, which is nice. I just have the one. If you're in that system and you have an Apple remote, the other good thing to remember is that it's available in Control Center. So when you go ahead and you're on your phone, and then you go and just swipe down from the upper right, you'll see right in the kind of in the bottom left of the screen there's a little remote icon. You tap it, And then depending on which Apple TV, which room that you're in, you can go and select it, and then you have all of the buttons as you normally would. If it's plugged into a sound bar or something where you can turn the volume up and down, you can even use the volume buttons, physical buttons on the phone to go ahead and change the volume, which I find is actually really nice. But if I had to go unlock the phone, open an app, and dive in, that would be too much friction. Just getting it from the control center is a really, really nice option. Next question.
Robert Sababity in Poland is asking, how do you panelists check for audio sync on live streams before the start of the stream?
Jesse?
First, we check for sync throughout our entire chain locally, and we do that by going to the absolute end of our stream and putting a recording device in, recording some kind of signal. We can do a clap. You can load up a video that has, bouncing balls and beeps and bops throughout it to check how well they're syncing up. Once we've found where we're at with the local sync, then we stream and do the exact same thing. So if we're streaming to YouTube, we will do a test stream unlisted, go to that file and look at how our sync is holding up at that level. And again, it's the same bouncing ball with a boop when the ball hits the bottom, or a clap or a guy singing with a song with a lot of B's and P's in the lyrics.
Alexander?
Yeah, so that's all good advice. I try to start with getting my audio direct into the camera. If you can get your audio going into the camera, which embeds it in either over SDI or HDMI, then those two things arrive at the same time. So if you think about how you set up your whole pipeline, that can also really help. Another thing, of course, is there are hardware solutions for this. If you look at this device, I think it's about 250 or 300 UK dollars. It's called a Syncit, which has been mentioned numerous times on the panel by various people. And this is a device you just basically put in front of the camera, and this will calculate the sync offset. So it's not an inexpensive device, but probably worth it for $300 if you're going to be doing this stuff all the time and you're really serious about sync.
Jesse?
And even if you're marrying audio to picture at the camera, definitely do a record at camera level and check, because we use Blackmagic's all the time, and there's 2 to 3 frame offset sometimes, depending on which camera it is and how we're filming and what we're doing. So definitely check where you're marrying the audio to the picture to see if there's any delay there.
And at a lower level, light travels faster than sound, so it is normal for us to hear the sound slightly after we see the lips moving. That won't break your brain, and it won't make you uncomfortable to a point. If it's too far out of sync, then obviously that's a problem. But where it really, really is a trouble is the other way around. If you hear the audio before you see the lips moving, immediately everyone is made uncomfortable by that, because that never occurs in nature. So that is the more crucial, is making sure that audio isn't ahead of video, and that's why so many audio interfaces have milliseconds of delay that you can tweak in order to dial it right in there. Not so much on the video side, but having perfect sync is always the way to go. In a perfect world, if only. Next question.
Cindy Drosta in Erie, Colorado is asking, I want to upgrade my mic for office hours and other Zoom meetings. What is an affordable audio interface to use with only one XLR mic and no other audio sources?
Nigel?
Yeah, so you don't necessarily have to buy an XLR when you get one of these very nice modern MV7 Pluses. You'll find it has a very good USB, and this is my travel mic when I go traveling. So that might stop you needing an interface. I have a Mix Pre 3, but if I was to start again, I would probably look at the Rode product set. I think I'm increasingly impressed by what Rode are doing. They added some new features to their latest products the other day, some virtual features, which I think are pretty good. So while it's more than one, I'd probably try the Rodecaster Duo. People other than me may have different views on the quality of the preamps, but to me they sound pretty good, and they are strong and flexible, and a great way to get an XLR microphone into a system.
Alexander?
Yeah, for single mic input, if you were going to plug an XLR mic in, I would recommend looking at something like the Lewitt Connect 2 USB-C audio interface. They have very high quality, high gain, quiet preamps. I think it's about 75 dB a gain. That'll power basically any microphone properly, including gain-hungry, low-output mics like the SM7B and the RE20 and the PR40 mics. So that's a good one. And also it has onboard DSP processing as well, parametric EQ, compression, downward expander, and then of course it has a really nice mixer control app with built-in loopback channels. So you can not only have your own mix minus and your own headphone mix, but you can also create a loopback channel here and have that routed out to Zoom. So you can mix different sources and have that play back through the loopback channel as well. It's $199 US on Sweetwater right now. That's the one that I would look at. Of course, the other thing is, I don't know about your studio space, Cindy, and how much noise you have. So, you know, if background noise is a concern, and if you want it to be absolutely dead quiet, Nigel's suggestion is great. I would seriously just go with the Shure MV7 Plus, which is the latest model, because that one has a really good background noise reduction that sounds really, really natural. And Shure has a great software control app for that thing too. And the cool thing about it is once you get the mic set up with the settings that you want, if you save those settings, it will store the settings to the onboard memory of that microphone. So you don't even have to have that app running in the background just to get those features working. So that's what I would look at. And of course that mic has the XLR port on it as well. So down the road, for some reason you want to connect it to an interface, you've got the XLR jack. So it gives you the best of both worlds.
Courtney?
And like you say, if you're on a budget, you know, you could, and you want to keep it simple. You've already got a good XLR mic. You just want to get it into Zoom. You can get one of these Shure XLR to USB converters. This has USB-C. It's about $129. That's pretty expensive, and it has monitoring built in so that you can hear side tone by plugging your headphones in there, and you'll be able to hear the Zoom return as well over the headphones that are plugged into this microphone, and you'll be able to hear the microphone with zero latency coming into those headphones so you can hear side tone. If that's too rich for you, there's an even cheaper version, which is this Pile XLR to USB. The problem with the Shure is there are no controls on it. Now, there's no equalization or anything like that on this, but I'll tell you, I have the fancy Rodecaster Pro that's, you know, I'm using every day here on office hours, and I have all that fancy stuff turned off. It's just bypassed. There's no processing I have turned on, and I'm using the sound cancellation. I'm using noise reduction from Zoom, so I have personalized audio turned on, and it does a pretty good job. A few complaints here and there. They'll hear something clipped if there's really loud noise outside, but that's pretty handy. So I don't use all that processing power. I have it turned off. So this doesn't have any processing built in, but it does have these two little knobs on here so that you can control the sound that's coming into your headphones from this. So this has a headphone output just like the Shure does, but then you can control the level of the headphones and control the level of the side tone coming from your microphone into the headphones on this Pile adapter. And I bought one. It sounds okay. It's not quite as quiet as the Shure is, but I mean, just a few dB. And if you're using Zoom, it'll be doing noise reduction anyway. You probably won't hear it. So that's a really cheap way. So for $50, that can do it for you.
Next question.
Mike Beardmore in Bedford, UK is asking, Steve, GRC Gibson, said he replaces 2 terabytes spinning drive in his 16-unit RAID every 6 months. What are the panel's experience?
Jesse?
I think we need a little bit more context for the question. Why is he replacing 1 out of the 16 every 6 months? That means that over the course of 8 years, he has a full drive refresh. I'm not really sure what he's trying to achieve by replacing 1 out of the 16. My experience is 20 terabytes a month. We cycle through and then retire, fill up the drive, and then put it in storage, fill up the next 20, put it in storage. We don't really reuse drives. We just buy new ones and push the old data into archive.
Alexander?
Yeah, for context, and I haven't finished the episode, but I was just listening. This is the latest episode of Security Now, episode 992, where he talked about that and basically he got into a conversation about spinning drives and the type of reliability that they have, and that depending on the manufacturer, they all have their own levels of reliability and they're all subject to failure. So he was just basically talking about his RAID system and how he seems to have to replace those drives fairly often. Now, the one thing the curious thing I find though with Steve as being a very incredibly intelligent security guy, I don't know why he uses such small capacity drives. Now, those 2 terabyte drives, I mean, that's not a lot of storage on one drive, and he's probably using a very, very old model of storage drive, so that could have an impact on the reliability. I find a lot of the newer enterprise grade stuff from Seagate and Western Digital, they seem to be pretty good. He does make mention of the Backblaze yearly hard drive reliability report. Backblaze is a company, for those that don't know, that have cloud-based backup storage. They do this incredible in-depth report every year showing all the different various makes and models and sizes and their reliability levels. So if you're shopping for a drive, you got to look at the Backblaze report because that will give you some indication of the best potential models to get.
Courtney?
Yeah, and there's this guy named Steve Gibson that wrote this program called SpinRite that will basically reformat without removing the data from your spinning hard drive. But I guess he may use that. This is a good practice because spinning hard drives have a problem of as the more you use them, the more the head actuator moves. It wears down after a while. The actuator does. The metal on that actuator arm wears down a little bit. And it changes the alignment of that head with the tracks on the spinning drive if the tracks, which, those are laid down when it's hard formatted the first time. So as it ages, a spinning drive will get out of alignment with the tracks. And that's one of the things that SpinRite does is it sucks the data off before that misalignment gets too great and re-records the low-level formatting of the drive in line with how the heads are worn at this point in time. So he avoids all that, having to do that since he's got a RAID that has his data spread across multiple drives. He just pulls one out and sticks a new one in and keeps track of which one he pulled out last. The RAID will then reformat and make up the data that's been lost from that one drive from checksum information on the other drives and rebuild that drive image automatically in the background so that eventually, he gets rid of that wear and tear errors that will build up on that drive after a number of years of spinning continuously. So that's probably what he's doing there.
Jesse?
But it seems like if you're using, if we're talking about 2 terabytes over what seems to be accumulating to 8 years of use, it seems like it makes more sense to buy fresh drives. They're so affordable. It feels like a problem that he has created in this situation. Is there some more context I'm not getting?
It could just be new drives. Sorry, Courtney, I don't know if you had something.
Yeah, I think he's putting new drives, a new 2 terabyte drive in, because the old terabyte drive that he pulled out has, how many years does he say? 6 months. Okay, it has 6 months of head movement on it. So it's starting to wear down a little bit. Pulls that one out. It's still got all of his data on it and sticks a new drive in there. And so instead of, you can't, unless you copy all the data at once to a new NAS, it's a nightmare to restore that many terabytes of data. So if you just pull one out of a RAID unit at a time, it'll rebuild the data from that drive without any external copying going on. It'll do it internally automatically. The RAID will, because of its error recovery. And that way, the drives don't age. He just buys a new spinning hard drive every 6 months and sticks it in there. And so he's only buying one every, 2 a year. So that's not too expensive. And eventually he ends up replacing all of them after, 5 years, 4 years, so that the wear doesn't accumulate on all of them the same.
And we're going to be talking a little bit more about network attached storage and multi-drive RAID solutions and things like that in the second hour. So hang around for that in just about 10 minutes. We'll get there. But in the meantime, you're going to have to hold your curiosity. Next question.
Zach Stallsmith in Chautauqua, New York asks, since I'm selling a Mac, I need to transfer my DVS license. Looks like I can pay $30 to make any DVS license transferable, correct?
I'm not sure about paying the $30 to make the DVS license transferable, although, and Mickey says in the chat that that is the correct assumption. I'm not sure if that, though, does it mean it's infinitely transferable many, many times? Or if it's just literally moving through a computer upgrade, moving from one computer to the other, if that's something that you can contact support and have them help you out with. But we will hopefully get an answer for that one in the chat. But that's just me thinking out loud on what the variation is there. Go ahead, Courtney.
Is DVS Dante virtual
Yes.
sound card? Okay. I was just confused for a minute.
Yeah,
it's
so,
assigned to that. It's fingerprinted for that particular machine, I guess. Once you pay the license for it.
Mickey did confirm my suspicion. $30 allows you to activate and deactivate as much as you want. But again, Zach, if you don't want to spend the $30, I would consider reaching out to support and just say that you're upgrading your machine. And maybe they'll give you some leniency, even though the original license is supposed to be locked to that initial one. Not sure how flexible they are. Next question.
Greg Kadoki in Toronto is asking, what AVB compliance switch would you suggest for connecting 4 Meyer Galaxys and 1 control computer using AVB for audio transport?
That's a good one, Craig. I'm not sure I have an answer for that, but Alexander might. Go ahead.
Yeah, so there's lots of companies that sell audio over IP products that have their own branded switches. For example, like PreSonus, if you buy a Studio Live console, they've got their own 5-port network switch. Now, these ones have the locking Neutrik, what they call EtherCon cable, and this one actually is a PoE-capable switch. That's one version. Of course, Mo2 has their own, which just uses standard RJ45 jacks. I don't know if there's anything special about these other than the fact that they're pre-configured with quality of service that probably prioritizes, certain things. But I've never actually owned these. I've used the PreSonus because I've used their consoles with their stage boxes. So I'm not super knowledgeable with networking, so I can't recommend one or the other. But and a lot of these companies, they're probably not manufacturing their own. They're probably, I'm sure, partnering with some networking company that's probably building these switches for them. I wouldn't be surprised if it was Netgear.
And the chat, once again, coming in with some really good information. Mickey says that he's used the Cisco 9300 series and also L Acoustics network switch, though he doesn't have to use AVB much. JJ mentions that the Cisco backplane can very easily carry the transport, but had some build issues in their January firmware release. And any way you slice it, make sure that AVB, that specific specification, is supported by the switch. Thank you, Mickey, JJ, and Chris Sabato for that context. Next question.
John Foltz in Selinsgrove, Pennsylvania is asking, for those of us at a certain age, what are the implications of AirPods as hearing aids? Can you repeat that?
Nigel.
I think the biggest implication is that a fundamental reset up of the hearing aid business, at least in the US. Typically, you need to go to an audiologist who will do a set of audio tests on your ears and will then fit you with a hearing aid, should you need one, for the manufacturer that they distribute. And what they probably won't do is, give you a choice of hearing aids from a choice of manufacturers and then say, well, let's pick the right one for you, because they are distributors typically for one manufacturer or the other. So the first thing that means is that they charge a lot of money. And hearing aids can cost thousands, and depending if you get the very latest ones with all the latest integrations, tens of thousands. So Apple moving into that market, as well as other providers from other places around the world, is starting to reposition the pricing of that. However, the first thing you did was go to an audiologist who actually did a proper testing of your hearing. Now, there's talk, and I don't think any of us have seen this capability yet, that the new AirPods will be able to do some of the tests the audiologist will be able to do, and may even be able to set up your iPad or your iPods to work and tune them the way the audiologist would tune your hearing aids. And if all of that's true, then they may act as a very good substitute. However, people who wear hearing aids wear them all day. AirPods don't tend to work all day, so they may be very good for selective use in selective places. Now, some of the latest hearing aids have the ability with an iPhone, for instance, if you point your iPhone in a certain way, it will pick up and focus the sound on that. So hearing aids are working with devices like iOS and Android to improve the experience. But if you really need a hearing aid to work all day, every day, then AirPods are not necessarily at this point the solution. But you can start to see how they're going to change that industry and refocus it.
Courtney?
Yeah, any in-ear monitors that wireless in-ear monitors these days that have active noise cancellation can basically perform as a hearing aid, because if they have microphones in them for using them as a Bluetooth connection to your phone for making phone calls, they'll have a microphones in each ear, and the ability to do noise cancellation. They can shape the frequency of the sound that you hear. So what Apple has done is built an app that will let them give you a audiologist test. There's some question about that, because if you go to the audiologist, they shut you into a soundproof booth, and they perform these tests where they send a variety of frequency tones into these headsets that you put on at very, very low levels, so that they can chart your hearing and any deficiencies you have at certain frequencies. And then, like Nigel said, they generate a profile for your hearing that amplifies certain frequencies over others to equalize your hearing and bring it back to normal. And this is usually done with very expensive $2,000 to $3,000 hearing aids. I think the main problem is going to happen with this, and that's certainly doable without the, although you probably don't have a soundproof booth at home to take that test in. And they had to get approval from the FDA for that app that does the testing. So that has to pass FDA approval to use it as a hearing aid device. I think the main problem is going to be, because if you've got those earpods in with a little white booger hanging out of your ear, everyone thinks you're not listening to them. So, if you're using them as hearing aids, no one will try and talk to you, because I think you're listening to something else and not realize the fact that you're using those as hearing aids. So that's a major disappointment. You'll think they're ignoring you, or you'll think you can talk behind their back because they're listening to music on those AirPods and not you.
That's a feature. You can surreptitiously listen. No, they are expecting the FDA approval to be forthcoming, and the basic idea of it is that they're going to have an FDA approved hearing test that you can do is in a quiet space. It doesn't have to be necessarily a soundproof booth. I had a lot of tubes in my ears when I was a little kid, and so I have had, because of the scar tissue on my eardrums, a lot of hearing loss from a young age. And I remember being in a lot of audiologists' offices. Raise your right hand, raise your left hand, do a hearing test. And most people don't do that. The thing that excites me about this is that if there is, even if it's not a perfect hearing test, if it's a hearing test that people can just do in their homes, then there's a better chance that people will do it. And then, because the iPhone is the pipeline for the audio to get to the AirPods in the first place, it's not just for a hearing aid mode, but when you're listening to music, when you're watching a video, when you're doing anything that has to do with sound, it can tune its audio output so that it sounds, or so that it's compensating for whatever unique spectrum loss you're feeling. I talked on the phone for a long time while driving in a noisy car for many years, and I have hearing loss in my right ear, and I'm not necessarily, at the age you would expect hearing loss to happen. So I'm thankful for it for sure. Couple quick announcements. We've got tomorrow is our weekend Q&A, and then Sunday is our introspection episode. So I'd like to hang around for those. Keep a reminder, though, those are not broadcast. They're broadcast. They're not DVR'd, so they're available Just log into Makana. And of course, you can go to officehours.global/join and register there if you'd like the links on how to get into that. Sunday's more of an introspection day where we get a little bit more philosophical. And then Saturday is a place that we can test out new technology and also have new hosts and readers try their hand at things. So we always like that. Also, I always like to remind our audience that we're not only run by your questions, which we appreciate, but also by your generosity. So if you'd like to support us, you can consider doing that at officehours.global/donate, and we'd appreciate it. We're talking about NAS. NAS